Welcome to this video on passing data with props. After watching this video, you will be able to identify the features of props in React Native, describe how props work in transmitting data between components, illustrate the application of props to customize a React Native component, such as employee detail, and describe the significance of using default props. Props in React Native are the properties used to send data from one component to another. This data transmission makes your application design flexible and easy to read, allowing you to display or update details based on the data you provide. Let's look at how props work. Props are transmitted to a component, usually from a parent to a child component, like how attributes are passed to an HTML element. The child component then uses these props as an object to pass information as properties in a functional component. To understand the functioning of a prop, let's look at an example involving the employee detail component. Consider a scenario where a parent component sends an employee's name and department as props to the child component, employee detail. On receiving these props, the child component displays the employee's details accordingly. This scenario shows how props help pass and display dynamic data in React Native. Let's delve deeper to understand the step-by-step process that helps achieve this functionality through props. To begin with, you first need to create a functional component in React Native called employee detail. This component will receive data or parameters in the form of an object called props and then print a welcome message along with department details. Here's a sample code to create the employee detail component. As observed from this code, in the employee detail component, some data is getting rendered within text using props. Props help to pass data from a parent component. This data allows the employee detail component to customize the content that the component is supposed to display, such as showing different employee names or departments based on the provided props. Now, let's explain the different props in this example of the employee detail component. Let's begin with receiving props. The employee detail component is a functional component that takes props as its input. It uses these props to display different properties in its output. In other words, the component can dynamically use the data it receives through props to show various details. Next, let's look at the use of props. In this example, note that the name prop is used inside the component, which helps identify the user and display a personalized message for them. Here, props.name is a string that dynamically replaces the value of the name prop while running the program. For example, if the name prop is John Doe, the component will display hello, John Doe. Finally, let's understand the rendering aspect of props. In the employee detail component, you will notice a text element that displays a welcome message along with the prop object, which includes the employee's name and department details. After creating the functional component employee detail in React Native, the next step is to use it in a parent component. The parent component uses this employee detail component and passes the user's details as props. Here is the code you can use to perform this step. Note that props help pass data to the employee detail component in the app component. Let's look at the tasks you need to perform to achieve this step. The first task involves creating the component. The app component is the main component that displays employee details, such as the employee's name and department. Next, the name and department props are transferred to employee detail with the values John Doe and finance. The last task is to render the employee detail component. The name and dep props are passed to the employee detail component and can be used when rendering the component. For example, the employee detail component uses these props to display the employee's name and department. The app component is another component that acts as the parent component and uses employee detail to pass the employee details. Each time employee detail is used, the name and dep props are provided. Based on the steps you performed for passing data from the app parent component and passing it with props in the employee detail component example, you will receive the final output as displayed on the screen. Proceeding further, let's now understand the significance of default props and the syntax for their use. Default props set default values for props that are missed and not passed by the parent component. This ensures that the functional component still works correctly, even when some props are missing. Here is the code for using default props. To understand this code, Let's look at a sample syntax. Here, employee detail refers to the name of the React component where default props are set as parameters. Default props is a feature in React that allows you to set initial values for a component's props if the parent component does not provide them. The name part sets an object with key values for props. It ensures that if props are not passed, it can use default values. The default name part is the fallback value for the name prop if it is not provided by the parent component. In the given example, if the app component does not send any data for the name variable to its child component employee detail, then based on the default values for props in the employee detail component, the final output will have default name as a value instead of John Doe. To conclude, props are a key feature in React Native that allows data transmission from one component to another, making the components reusable and customizable. The example of the employee detail component shows the use of props to display employee information, demonstrating how props enable dynamic and flexible components in React Native. In this video, you learned that props in React Native are the properties used to send data from one component to another, usually from a parent to a child component. The child component uses props as an object to pass information as properties in a functional component. The proper functioning of props requires two key steps: creating a functional component in React Native and using the created functional component in a parent component. Default props are used to set default values for props if they are missed and not passed by the parent component.